You should have kept walking, kid. He didn't. In 6 seconds that no one was supposed to see, an 18-year-old mechanic with grease still under his fingernails stepped into the dark and swung a tire iron that changed his entire life. One boy, four bullies, one old biker bleeding on the ground, and a whole street full of people who chose to look away. Ethan Walker didn't. If this story moves you, subscribe, hit that bell, and drop your city in the comments below. I want to see exactly how far this story travels. The night that changed everything started the way every other night in Ethan Walker's life started, quietly, without ceremony, and with the smell of motor oil so deep in his skin that no amount of soap could fully reach it. It was a Thursday, late October, the kind of Arizona evening where the desert still holds heat from the afternoon sun, but the air at your back carries the first real bite of something colder coming. Ethan had clocked out of Castillo's Auto and Repair at exactly 9:47 p.m. He knew the time because he always checked, not out of impatience, but because he was the one who locked up, turned off every light, checked every tool twice, and made sure the compressor valve wasn't leaking before he walked out. He had been doing that since he was 15. 3 years of the same routine, the same responsibility, and the same 12-minute walk home along Route 9, cutting past the old Maverick filling station that had been boarded up and forgotten since before he was born. He was tired. Not the dramatic kind of tired that people talk about in movies. Just the real heavy kind, the kind where your shoulders drop half an inch without you realizing it, and your feet find their rhythm on pavement because your brain is already thinking about the next day's schedule. He had a 7 a.m. oil change on a Dodge Ram, a transmission flush that was going to take most of the morning. And sometime in between, he needed to call the insurance company about his mother's medication billing again because they had denied a claim for the third time. And the woman on the phone had actually had the nerve to put him on hold for 40 minutes before disconnecting. That was the weight Ethan Walker carried into that Thursday night. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just the accumulated pressure of being 18 years old and already responsible for more than most men twice his age would ever carry. He turned the corner past the chain link fence, and then he heard it. Not a scream, not a crash, something worse, that particular kind of laughter that has no warmth in it. The kind that comes out of 4 mouths at once and is aimed deliberately downward. At something. At someone. Ethan slowed his walk without consciously deciding to. The laughter came from behind the old gas station, that strip of cracked asphalt behind the building where teenagers sometimes gathered to do things teenagers do when they think no one is watching. Ethan had passed it 100 times without a second glance, but tonight there was something different in that sound. A weight to it. A meanness that had moved past entertainment and into territory that made the hair on the back of his neck respond before his mind caught up. He stopped at the corner of the building. There were 4 of them, late teens, maybe early 20s, big enough to matter individually. Together they were a wall. They wore the standard uniform of board cruelty hoodies, ball caps turned sideways, the posture of boys who had never in their lives been made to answer for anything. And on the ground in front of them was a man. He wasn't young. Ethan could see that immediately. The man was somewhere in his late 50s, maybe 60, built like someone who had once been enormously powerful and still carried the architecture of that even as age had worked on him. Silver-streaked hair, a leather vest with patches that Ethan couldn't fully read in the low light, a beard that was more gray than black. He had one hand braced against the pavement like he was trying to push himself back up, and the other arm was curled protectively around his ribs. One of the 4 boys kicked him, not softly. The man grunted and his supporting arm slipped, and he went down harder than before. "Stay down, old man," one of them said. The tallest one. He had his hands in his pockets like this bored him, like it was maintenance. "You already lost." The man on the ground said something back. Ethan couldn't hear the exact words, but he heard the tone. Defiant, low and rough as gravel. Whatever the man said, it made the tall boy's jaw tighten. "He's talking back," one of the others said, and laughed that hollow laugh again. Ethan looked around. There were at least 3 other people visible from where he was standing. A man near a parked car 20 feet away, watching with his arms folded and his face carefully blank. A woman on the sidewalk who had slowed her pace but was now deliberately speeding up. Again, eyes forward, jaw set, choosing not to know. Someone in a lit window above a shop across the street, looking down, not moving. Nobody was going to do anything. The thought arrived in Ethan's mind, with a clarity that was almost like sound. Nobody was going to do anything, and this old man was going to keep getting hurt, and tomorrow everyone would shake their heads about it and use words like terrible and tragic as if they had not been standing exactly here and exactly watching. Ethan's eyes moved to the ground around him. Old habit, the kind you develop when you work in a garage and your hands are always reaching for whatever tool is closest. There was a length of old pipe near the dumpster, a broken pallet, and there leaning against the cinder block wall of the gas station, half covered by a black trash bag that had split open and spilled its contents, a tire iron. He didn't stop to think about whether he was going to pick it up. He already had it in his hand. Later days later, then weeks later, then in interviews he never wanted to give, people would ask Ethan what he was thinking in that moment, what calculation he ran, what decision he made, and every time the answer was the same and people always seemed vaguely unsatisfied by it, as though they wanted something more complex, more heroic, more considered. I wasn't thinking, he said. I was just already moving. That was the truth of it. 6 seconds. That's how long the space was between hearing the second kick land and Ethan Walker being inside that circle of 4 boys with a tire iron in his right hand and his body positioned between them and the man on the ground. 6 seconds. The tall boy saw him first and actually laughed. "Who are you?" Ethan didn't answer. He didn't have a speech prepared. He wasn't playing a role. He just held the tire iron at his side easy like he'd been holding tools his whole life, which he had, and he looked at all 4 of them in sequence left to right the way you assess a mechanical problem before you touch it. "Little boy," the tall one said, "you're making a mistake." Ethan still didn't answer. "He's not going to do anything," the one on the left said to the others. "Look at him, he's a kid." It was the one on the left who stepped forward first. Maybe to prove the point, maybe because he was the impulsive one in the group, the one who didn't think before he moved. He stepped forward with his right shoulder dropping in that unmistakable way that means a punch is already committed before it's thrown. Ethan didn't step back. He stepped slightly to the side the way you move when you know the physics of what's coming, and the arm came up. Not to block. The tire iron connected with the inside of the boy's forearm on its way forward, and the sound it made was not dramatic. It was practical. The boy's face went from aggression to shock so fast it looked like someone had changed a slide. He grabbed his arm and bent forward and made a sound that was more surprise than pain, though the pain was clearly incoming. The other 3 went still. That stillness was the most important moment. Not the strike, not the noise. The stillness that followed when 4 boys who had been performing for each other suddenly found themselves standing without an audience and without a script. Ethan looked at the tall one. The tall one held the eye contact for 3 full seconds. Then he looked at his friend bent over his arm. Then he looked back at Ethan. "You're crazy," he said. But there was something different in his voice now. The boredom was gone. Something else had replaced it that he was trying to disguise as contempt. "Leave," Ethan said. It was the first word he had spoken. It came out quiet and flat and without decoration. Not a threat, not a challenge, a direction. The tall one looked at the others. That silent group calculation happened in less than a second. Then without another word, without posturing, without a closing remark, they walked away. Quickly, the one with the hurt arm was cradling it against his chest, and the others had that particular speed that wants to be casual but is actually something much closer to retreat. They were gone around the corner inside of 40 seconds. Ethan stood where he was until he couldn't hear them anymore. Then he turned around. The man on the ground was looking up at him with an expression that Ethan genuinely could not read. It wasn't gratitude exactly. It wasn't confusion. It was something more complicated, the look of a man reassessing something he thought he already knew. "You hurt?" Ethan asked. "I've been hurt worse," the man said. His voice was deep and rough and absolutely unhurried, even now, even on the ground with his ribs clearly aching. He had the voice of someone who decided long ago that he would not let pain change the pace at which he spoke. Ethan reached down and offered his hand. The man looked at it for a moment, a pause that meant something, though Ethan couldn't have said what, and then took it. He was heavier than he looked, and Ethan braced properly, using his legs the way you do when you're pulling something up that matters. The man got to his feet. He winced once, controlled it immediately, and straightened up to a height that surprised Ethan slightly. Standing, he was actually taller than the tall boy who had been running the show 60 seconds ago. Jack, the man said, just that. No last name, no explanation. Ethan, Ethan said. They stood there for a moment in the way that strangers stand when something has just happened between them that doesn't have a script. The tire iron was still in Ethan's hand. He became aware of it suddenly and looked around for somewhere to set it down. You can keep that, Jack said, watching him. A small dry thing that wasn't quite a smile moved across his face. I don't need it, Ethan said, and put it back against the wall where he'd found it. Jack watched him do this. He watched Ethan look down to make sure it was stable against the wall and wouldn't fall. He watched Ethan turn back with his hands in his jacket pockets, his face carrying nothing remarkable. No adrenaline glow, no pride, no story he was composing about himself. Where are you headed? Jack asked. Home, Ethan said. Where's home? 12 minutes that way, Ethan said, nodding north along Route 9. Jack nodded like that made sense. Then he said, you work around here, Castillo's, 3 blocks back. Mechanic? Yeah. Another pause. The desert wind moved between them. How old are you? Jack asked. 18. Something moved in Jack's eyes, not pity, not condescension, something closer to recognition, though, of what Ethan couldn't yet have named. You know who I am, Jack asked. Ethan looked at the leather vest. The patches were clearer now that they were both standing, and the nearest streetlight was at a better angle. He could read the main rocker now. He could see what the center patch was. I've got to guess, Ethan said, and you stepped in anyway. That didn't seem like the relevant information at the time, Ethan said. Jack looked at him for a long moment. Then he laughed a real laugh, the kind that comes out of the body before the mind decides whether to allow it. It was brief, and it ended quickly, restrained by what were clearly bruised ribs, but it was real. Go home, Ethan, Jack said. You gonna be all right? Ethan asked. I've been all right in worse places than this, Jack said. Ethan nodded. He believed him. He said goodnight the way he said everything, simply without performance, and he turned north on Route 9 and started walking. He did not look back. He thought about the Dodge Ram and the transmission flush. He thought about the insurance claim and the woman who had put him on hold. He thought about whether he had enough of bread left at home to make a proper sandwich before bed, or whether it was going to be crackers again. He did not think about what had just happened. There was nothing to think about. It was done. It was over. Whatever it was behind him. He was home by 10:09 p.m. He made crackers work. He was asleep by 10:45. What Ethan Walker did not know, could not have known, was that 40 feet from where he had been standing in a second-floor apartment above a shuttered cell phone repair shop, a 19-year-old named Marcus Reyes had been sitting by his open window, eating a bag of chips and holding his phone in the bored, automatic way that people hold phones when they are not specifically using them, but aren't quite willing to put them down either. Marcus had heard the laughter too. He had leaned forward and looked down. He had watched the whole thing, not the earlier parts, because by the time he looked, the 4 boys were already gathered, but he had watched from the moment Ethan Walker appeared at the edge of his vision to the moment Ethan put the tire iron back against the wall and walked north without looking back. Marcus had not meant to start recording. His thumb had found the camera icon by reflex the way it did for anything that surprised him, and the phone had been filming for most of it. He sat back after Ethan disappeared around the corner. He looked at the video. It was 43 seconds. The stabilization was poor. The light was bad and the angle was from above and slightly to the right, which meant you could not fully see faces, but you could see the whole picture. The man on the ground, the 4 boys, the figure that appeared from the left edge of the frame, the moment, the stillness, the departure. Marcus watched it 3 times. Then he sat for a moment doing that thing people do when they have something in their hands and they're not sure yet what it is. He posted it at 11:23 p.m. with a caption that he would spend the next 2 weeks simultaneously proud of and anxious about. Kid didn't even hesitate. 6 seconds. Somebody find out who this is. He got 17 likes before he fell asleep. He woke up the next morning to 4,000 notifications. At 6:52 a.m., Ethan Walker's phone alarm went off and he silenced it on the first buzz, the way he always did, no snooze, no negotiation, just off and up, because the day had a schedule and the schedule was the schedule. He made coffee, strong no sugar because His mentor, Rafael Castillo, had once told him that a man who needs sugar in his coffee is a man who is trying to make something tolerable that he should be learning to appreciate. And Ethan at 15 had found this philosophy simultaneously irritating and completely persuasive. He drank his coffee by the kitchen window. His mother, Diane Walker, was still asleep. She worked the early shift at the call center Tuesday through Saturday, which meant Thursday mornings were hers, and he tried to be quiet. He checked his phone for the first time at 7:01 a.m. while lacing his boots. He had 43 unread messages from numbers he didn't recognize. He stared at this for a moment, then scrolled up to the top of the first one. "Bro, are you the guy in the video?" He didn't know what video. He closed the message and put his phone in his jacket pocket. He had a Dodge Ram waiting. The second message came from Danny Figueres, who worked the morning shift at the gas station 2 blocks from Castillo's, and who Ethan had known since junior high. "Ethan, bro, you're everywhere. You didn't tell me about this." Ethan stood in the hallway with his jacket half on and read that message twice. He opened Instagram. He didn't use it much, but he had it. He typed his own name into search with a kind of clinical detachment, the way you look up a symptom you don't quite believe you have. The fourth result on the search page was a video. The preview image was dark, bad angle, but he could see the shape of the old gas station in the corner of the chain link fence and a figure he recognized because it was wearing his jacket. He pressed play. He watched himself for 43 seconds. Then he stood there in the hallway for a while. The video had been viewed, according to the counter at the bottom of the screen, 940,000 times. That number was moving upward as he watched it. "Ethan," his mother's voice from the bedroom. "You heading out?" "Yeah," he said, "going now. There's leftover rice in the fridge if you didn't eat." "I ate," he said, which was technically true if coffee counted. He put his phone back in his pocket and walked out the front door and headed toward Castillo's, because the Dodge Ram didn't care about Instagram and the transmission wasn't going to flush itself. He was 7 minutes into his walk when the first car slowed down next to him. A man he had never seen in his life leaned out the window and pointed at him. "Hey, you're that kid, right? From the video." Ethan looked at him. "I don't know what you mean," he said. This was not a lie exactly. He knew what the man meant. He simply hadn't decided yet what he was going to do about it, and until he had the honest answer was that he had no idea what this moment was supposed to mean. The man looked at him strangely, then drove on. Ethan kept walking. Rafael Castillo was 61 years old and had been running his shop in Kingman, Arizona for 23 years. He was a compact man of Mexican and Apache descent who had the hands of someone who had been working with machinery since before power steering was standard, and who had not once in 23 years been overheard raising his voice, not because he had no temper, but because he believed a man who controls his voice controls the room, and a man who controls the room doesn't need the voice. He was the one who had hired Ethan at 15, not out of charity. He had told Ethan this directly at the time. "I don't do charity. I hire people who show up. You showed up. Let's see if you keep showing up." Ethan had kept showing up for 3 years. When Ethan walked into the garage at 7:03 a.m., Rafael was already under the hood of a Chevy Silverado and did not look up. "Ram is in Bay 2, he said. "Yeah," Ethan said, and moved toward the supply cabinet to start his setup. There was a silence of about 4 minutes that was entirely comfortable, because in 3 years they had built the kind of working relationship where silence was functional and not a sign of anything. Then Rafael said from under the Silverado hood, "You gonna tell me about the video?" Ethan set down the oil filter he was holding. "How'd you see it?" he asked. "My daughter showed me at 6 this morning. She was very excited." "It's not a big deal," Ethan said. Rafael came out from under the hood and looked at him over the frame of the Silverado. He had grease on his chin and his reading glasses pushed up on his forehead, and the expression on his face was the one he used when he was deciding whether to push or let something breathe. He let it breathe. "Oil's in the cabinet on the left," he said, and went back under the hood. Ethan worked the ram. He was halfway through the drain cycle when his phone began vibrating against his thigh with a persistence that was impossible to ignore. He pulled it out. The notification count on his message app had a number in it that his phone was now displaying as a stylized icon because the actual number was too large to show in the standard badge format. He put the phone back. He worked. By noon, there were 2 news vans parked on the street in front of Castillo's. Rafael came to stand beside Ethan at the bay door, and they both looked at the vans without saying anything for a moment. You want me to go out there? Ethan asked. What would you say? Raphael asked. Ethan thought about it. Nothing worth hearing, he said. Then don't go out there, Raphael said simply and went back to the Silverado. One of the news vans sent a producer to the bay door at 12:30. She was young and professional and had the practiced energy of someone who was very good at making people feel that speaking to her was both normal and urgent. She had a business card ready before she'd finished her sentence. Ethan Walker. I'm from KNXV, and we'd really love just 5 minutes to— I don't have 5 minutes, Ethan said. He was wiping his hands on a shop rag. He said it without hostility because there was nothing personal about it. He simply had a transmission flush to finish, and the day had a schedule. The producer blinked. People didn't usually interrupt her opening sentence. I understand you're busy, but— The answer's no, Ethan said. Thank you. He turned back to the Ram. She stood there for a moment, then retreated. Raphael, who had heard all of this from inside the garage, said nothing. But Ethan caught the angle of his body shift slightly, in a way that meant he had noticed and formed an opinion. The vans were still there when Ethan left at 6 p.m. He went home the long way. His mother was awake when he got home. Diane Walker was 44 years old and had the kind of face that held emotion transparently, which was simultaneously one of the things Ethan loved most about her, and the reason he chose his words very carefully whenever something was wrong. She had the video playing on her laptop when he walked in. She looked up. Her eyes were doing something complicated. Why didn't you tell me? She asked. Ethan sat down across from her and took his boots off. There was nothing to tell, he said. A man was getting hurt. I stopped it. I came home. Ethan. I'm fine, Mom. That's not what I— She stopped. She looked back at the laptop screen, then at him. Were you scared? He thought about it honestly. No, he said. Not really. How is that possible? He didn't have a good answer for that. Not because the question was unfair. It was fair, but because the honest answer was something that was hard to make sense to someone who hadn't been standing in that moment. The fear hadn't found its place yet. Everything had happened too fast and too cleanly, and by the time there was space for fear to show up, it was already over. Is he okay? Diane asked. The man— He said he was. Did you get his name? Jack, Ethan said. She waited for more. More didn't come. She looked at the laptop again. There are 12 million views, Ethan. He looked at her. 12 million, she said again, as if she was still working through what that number meant for the physical world they were both sitting in. Ethan was quiet for a moment. Then he said, It doesn't change anything. People are calling you a hero, she said. I don't know what that means, he said. And he said it the way he said things when he actually meant them not as deflection, but as genuine statement of fact. He had done what was in front of him to do. The word hero felt like a label applied to the outside of a thing that was much simpler on the inside. Diane looked at her son for a long moment, with an expression that parents wear when they are watching their children to be something specific and recognizable and entirely themselves and not knowing whether to feel proud or worried or both at once. Your father would have— She started. Don't, Ethan said, gently, but clearly. She stopped. She nodded once. She closed the laptop. There's chicken in the oven, she said. Thanks, Mom, he said. They ate dinner without talking about it. Ethan did the dishes. His mother watched the evening news with the volume low. He could hear faintly the anchorwoman talking about a viral video, and he could see from the corner of his eye shaky footage of an old gas station, but he didn't turn to look, and Diane didn't call his name. He went to bed at 10:30. Somewhere across the country, the video was being shared in 40 different languages. Somewhere across the country, a man named Jack was making a phone call. And somewhere in Kingman, Arizona, at the end of a 12-minute walk from Castillo's Auto and Repair, an 18-year-old mechanic with grease under his fingernails was already asleep, dreaming about nothing in particular, completely unaware that the 6 seconds behind the abandoned gas station were only the first sentence of a story that was still being written. The chicken was gone, the dishes were done. Ethan was asleep. But the internet wasn't. By the time Friday morning arrived in Kingman, Arizona, the video that Marcus Reyes had posted from his second-floor window had crossed 22 million views. The number was so large, it had stopped meaning anything specific and had become something more like weather, something that existed at a scale beyond any single person's ability to fully hold in their mind. News desks across 3 time zones had assigned reporters to the story. A sports commentator in Dallas had posted a 40-second reaction clip that got more views than the original. A retired Marine in Ohio had made a video response from his kitchen table voice breaking that had itself gone viral. Twitter, or whatever it was calling itself that week, had the phrase "tire iron kid" trending by 7 a.m. Eastern Time. In Kingman, Ethan Walker's alarm went off at 6:52 a.m., and he silenced it on the first buzz, same as always. He made coffee, checked the weather out of habit because he sometimes biked to work when the morning was right, drank half the cup standing at the sink. Then he made the mistake of opening his phone. Not Instagram this time, just his regular messages. The contact list read like a fever dream. Names he recognized mixed with numbers he didn't, people from high school he hadn't spoken to in 2 years. A cousin in Tucson who never texted him about anything except birthday wishes. A teacher from 9th grade whose name he had genuinely forgotten was still in his contacts. The texts were all variations of the same thing. Are you okay? Call me. You're famous. This is crazy. My mom wants to know if you're the guy. I knew you were going to do something like this someday. That last one was from Tyler Marsh, who had sat behind Ethan in sophomore English and had never once said anything to him that Ethan could now remember. He stared at the message for a moment, feeling something he couldn't quite name. Not quite irritation, not quite sadness. Something smaller and more precise than either. He put the phone face down on the counter. His mother appeared in the kitchen doorway in her work clothes hair, half-done earring in one hand. She looked at him, then at the face-down phone, then back at him with the expression she used when she was calculating how much to push. They called the call center, she said. Ethan turned to look at her fully. Who did? Reporters. 2 of them. My supervisor pulled me aside before my shift yesterday and asked if I needed the day. She paused. I said no, obviously, but she said they'd been calling the front desk. He set the coffee mug down. They called your work. They were looking for contact information. For you. She said it carefully, not accusatorially, but the information landed the way she probably knew it would, like a hand placed flat on a bruise. Ethan stood very still for a moment. I'll figure it out, he said. I'm not worried, she said. I just thought you should know. I'll figure it out, he said again, quieter, and picked up his mug. She finished putting in her earring and kissed him on the top of his head, the way she had done since he was small enough for it to be natural, and she was out the door by 7:05. Ethan stood in the kitchen alone with the sound of the house settling around him and a phone lying face down on the counter that he could feel vibrating even from across the room. He flipped it over. The screen was dense with notifications. He scrolled past most of them. Then one stopped him. Not because of the name, he didn't recognize the name, but because of the first line preview visible without opening it. This is Jack. Got your number from... He opened it. This is Jack. Got your number from the county mechanic registry. I need to know you're doing okay. That video is everywhere, and I'm not sure you understand what that means yet. Call me if you want to talk. If you don't, I understand that too. Ethan read it twice, then he looked at the phone number at the top. Area code 928, local, or near enough. He saved the contact. He didn't call, not yet. He put the phone in his pocket and went to work. Raffle was unlocking the bay doors when Ethan arrived. The news vans from yesterday were gone, which Ethan registered as a relief for exactly 2 seconds before he saw the other cars. Not vans, not press vehicles with logos on the side. Just ordinary cars parked at irregular angles along the block, people sitting in them or standing near them, phones raised. They were watching the front of the garage. Raphael glanced at Ethan, then at the cars. His expression communicated nothing except the observation itself. You want to use the back, he said. No, Ethan said, and he walked straight through the front, eyes forward, pace unchanged. Someone called out his name. He kept walking. Someone else asked him a question he didn't fully catch. He kept walking. One person stepped partially into his path, not blocking, just angling with a phone held up like an offering, and Ethan stopped for the first time. He looked at the person, a young woman, maybe 20, college age, genuinely excited, genuinely not thinking about what she was doing. Sorry, she said immediately when she saw his face. Not the face of someone angry, just the face of someone very present and very serious and not performing anything. It's fine, Ethan said, and went past her and into the garage. Raphael let the bay door down behind him with a sound like punctuation. We got a 4-runner coming in at 8, Raphael said. Brake lines? Okay, Ethan said. And the Diaz family called. Their van's making that sound again. The Diaz van always makes that sound, Ethan said. It's the heat shield. I've told them 3 times. Tell them a 4th time, Raphael said. They trust you. This was the entirety of the morning's briefing. No commentary on the crowd outside. No questions about the video. No unsolicited opinions about what Ethan should or shouldn't be doing with the attention being directed at him from what was now, he would later learn, every major news market in the country. Raphael was the kind of man who understood that some people work through things by working, and that the kindest thing you can do for that kind of person is hand them a problem that has a solution. Ethan spent the first 2 hours of the morning under the forerunner. The brake lines were in worse shape than the initial estimate. They always were. He took the work apart systematically, the way he did everything, not rushing, not overthinking, just reading what was actually there, rather than what he'd expected to find. It was the thing Raphael had taught him that mattered most. The thing that made him good at this, the willingness to see what was actually in front of you, rather than the version you'd already composed in your head on the way in. He was deep inside the work when he heard Raphael's voice from the front of the garage firm, and not raised but carrying the particular tone that meant someone had come in uninvited. This is a working garage, Raphael was saying. You can stand outside all you want, but this floor is private property. Ethan set down his wrench. I'm not press, the other voice said. I can see what you are, Raphael said. The answer is still the same. Ethan came out from under the forerunner in time to see Raphael standing at the garage entrance, with his arms crossed, and a man in his 30s backing toward the door, with his phone already disappearing into his jacket pocket in the practiced way of someone who knew when the moment had passed. When the man was gone, Raphael turned and looked at Ethan. 4th one this morning, he said. Ethan wiped his hands on his rag. I'm sorry, he said. Don't apologize, Raphael said. His voice wasn't sharp, but it was clear. You didn't do anything wrong, but we need to talk about something. Ethan waited. Raphael pulled a stool from beside the supply cabinet and sat on it, which was unusual. He almost never sat during the workday. He set his hands on his knees and looked at Ethan directly. Your work is good, Raphael said. You know I don't say things I don't mean, so take that as exactly what it is. I know, Ethan said. And the people outside aren't going away, Raphael said. Not today, maybe not for a while. I know that too. This is going to affect the business, Raphael said. Not accusatorially, just accurately. Not badly, maybe the opposite, I don't know. But it's going to affect it. He paused. I need to know what you want to do about it. Ethan looked at him. What do you mean? Do you want to talk to them? Manage it. There are people who do that. Handle this kind of thing. No, Ethan said. Just checking, Raphael said. He stood back up, replaced the stool, and the conversation was over with the same efficiency it had started. Break lines by noon if you can. I can, Ethan said, and went back under the forerunner. But the conversation sat in him differently than it landed, because Raphael didn't waste words, not ever. Which meant that the space between what he'd said and what he hadn't said was where the actual information lived. And what lived there, Ethan understood, was something close to concern. Not for the business. For Ethan. Just wrapped in the only language Raphael used, which was practical and direct, and almost entirely free of the kind of emotional vocabulary that would have embarrassed both of them. He worked through the morning. At 11:40, the phone in his pocket buzzed with a text from a number he didn't recognize. And this time the preview line read something different enough that he stopped and opened it. You don't know me. My name is David Reese. I'm a producer at a network I won't name yet because I don't want you to dismiss this before you hear it. We would like to offer you... He closed it without finishing. At noon, another one. Hi, Ethan. This is Sarah Cho. I'm a journalist with... We've been following your story, and we believe there's an important conversation to be had about what ordinary people can do when closed. At 12:22, a call from the 928 number, Jack's number. He let it ring twice. Then he answered. Ethan. Jack's voice was the same as it had been in the dark behind the gas station. Unhurried, gravel deep, carrying the steady weight of someone who'd had difficult conversations in difficult places and had never once found it useful to pretend they were something else. Jack, Ethan said. A brief silence. How are you holding up? Fine, Ethan said. Then because it was Jack and something about the man made dishonesty feel like a waste of energy, it's a lot. Yeah, Jack said, it is. Another pause. I want you to know something. I didn't talk to anyone about who you are, where you work. I didn't give anyone your information. I know, Ethan said. He did know. He couldn't have fully explained why, but he did. They found it themselves, Jack said. The county mechanic registry is public record. Your name was in that video within 6 hours of it posting. After that, he let the rest of it go unsaid because the rest of it was self-evident. It's okay, Ethan said. It's not actually, Jack said. And there was something in his voice then, not apology exactly, but the weight of a man taking responsibility for a consequence he hadn't intended. You stepped in. You helped me. And now your life is... My life is fine, Ethan said. Ethan, I'm serious, Ethan said. And then because Jack's silence was the kind that waited for the truth rather than accepting the first answer, I don't want anything from this. I don't want to be on the news. I don't want someone to write a thing about me. I just want to go to work and fix cars and make sure my mother's insurance claim goes through. That's it. That's everything. Jack was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice had shifted in a way that was subtle but unmistakable, the way a room shifts when someone finally says the thing that was already in it. The insurance claim, Jack said. Marmecho. Your mother. What's the situation? Ethan almost said, it's fine again. The reflex was deep-grooved and automatic. But something stopped him, the particular quality of Jack's attention, maybe. The sense of a man who asked questions because he wanted accurate answers, not because he was making conversation. She has a cardiac condition, Ethan said. Nothing critical right now, but she needs a medication that they keep finding reasons not to cover. Third denial in 4 months. I've got an appeal in, but... He stopped himself. It's being handled. By you, Jack said. By me, Ethan said. Another silence. Longer this time. I'd like to come see you, Jack said. Not today, not this week maybe, but when things settle down a little, there are some things I'd like to say to you in person. You already said thank you, Ethan said. I know, Jack said. This is different. Ethan didn't ask what different meant. He said okay because Jack's voice carried the kind of credibility that made you take things at their word and figure out the details later. You need anything in the meantime, Jack asked. No, Ethan said. You sure? I'm sure, Ethan said. And then take care of those ribs. Jack made a sound that was approximately a laugh restrained by the same rib situation it was responding to. Get back to work, he said. I can hear you thinking about it. Ethan hung up. He stood for a moment in the relative quiet of the garage and felt something that was not quite relief but was adjacent to it. Something had been clarified by that conversation, though he couldn't have said what exactly. He went back to the brake lines. By 2 p.m. the Forerunner was done. By 3:30 the Diaz van had been in and out, and Ethan had explained the heat shield issue for the 4th time patiently and in full detail, using his hands to gesture the part into conceptual existence, since the part itself was easier to understand when you could show someone where to look. Mrs. Diaz was 67 and had a way of watching him when he explained things to her that made him think of his grandmother, who had died when he was 11, and who had also had that particular quality of attention, like what you were saying mattered and deserved to be fully received. You're a good boy, Mrs. Diaz told him when she paid. She always said this. Thank you, Mrs. Diaz, Ethan said. He always answered this way. She was halfway out the door when she stopped and turned back. I saw the video, she said. My granddaughter showed me. She looked at him with something more complex than the usual warmth. You know what I thought when I saw it? What? Ethan asked. I thought that's exactly right, she said. That's exactly what a person should do. She nodded once firmly, as if settling an argument she'd been having with someone. Not everyone thinks so, but I do. She left. Ethan stood at the bay door and watched her van pull out heat shield, ticking in that specific rhythm it always had, which he could now identify from 40 feet away, and felt the weight of her words in a way he hadn't expected. Not because they were grand, because they were simple. Because Mrs. Diaz had 67 years of watching the world do what it did, and she had seen the video, and her first thought was, that's exactly right. He went back inside. At 4:15, Raphael called him to the small office at the back of the shop. This was unusual. Raphael conducted most business in the open air of the garage itself, and the back office was generally reserved for insurance paperwork and the kind of phone calls that needed to be made sitting down. Ethan came in, and Raphael was standing at the desk with a folded piece of paper that he held out without preamble. "Someone left this," he said, "at the front, one of the people outside." Ethan took the paper and unfolded it. It was a business card essentially, but printed on regular paper, not a commercial card, something someone had made themselves. It had a name, a phone number, and below them, printed in small capital letters that had the feeling of someone choosing their words carefully. "We represent Ironjack. We know who you are and we know what you did. We want to talk when you're ready. There is no pressure and no timeline. We'll wait." Ethan read it twice. Raphael watched him read it. "You know what that means?" he asked. "Getting an idea," Ethan said. "Hell's Angels don't usually make business cards," Raphael said. His voice was completely neutral, which in Raphael's register meant he was paying close attention. "These aren't business cards," Ethan said. "No," Raphael agreed, "they're not." Ethan folded the paper back along its crease and put it in his jacket pocket beside his phone. Raphael looked at him for a moment. "You want to tell me anything?" "Not yet," Ethan said. Raphael nodded. This was apparently an acceptable answer. "4 runner keys are on the board. Mrs. Patterson's coming for it at 5. "I'll be at the desk," Ethan said. He sat at the front desk and watched the street through the dusty window and thought about things. About Jack's voice on the phone, about the paper in his pocket, about the fact that somewhere in the machinery of the world, the part that moved without asking permission, the part that ran on attention and momentum, and the basic human appetite for a story, his name had become a thing that people were reaching for, grasping at, trying to translate into something useful to themselves. He thought about his mother's insurance claim. Third denial, the appeal he'd filed himself using a template he'd found through 3 hours of research on a website designed for people who couldn't afford attorneys. He thought about the medication and the way his mother mentioned her chest, sometimes casually, the way people mention something when they've decided not to make it a conversation, but can't quite make it disappear. Mrs. Patterson came for the 4 runner at 5:02. Ethan locked up at 6:15. Raphael had already gone. The crowd outside had thinned but not disappeared. There were still 4 or 5 people maintaining a loose, aimless orbit around the front of the building, phones up hoping for something. Ethan walked out the front. One of them recognized him immediately and called his name. The others turned in that quick, synchronized way of a group that has been waiting for a signal. Ethan stopped walking. He turned toward them. He stood there for a moment while they all recalibrated to this unexpected stillness. "I'm going home," he said, not angry, not soft, just clear. "I walked 12 minutes to get to work this morning, and I'm going to walk 12 minutes to get home. I'm not going to answer questions. I'm not going to be on camera. I'm going to walk home." He looked at each of them in turn. "Whatever you're looking for," he said, "I don't think it's me. I think it's the idea of me, and I can't help you with that." He turned back and walked north on Route 9. Nobody followed. He was 3 minutes into the walk when his phone buzzed. He expected another unknown number, but the screen showed a name he recognized: Danny Figueres, gas station Danny Junior High. Danny, who had texted him yesterday in disbelief. He answered it. "Bro," Danny said, "no greeting, no preamble. Did you see the news tonight? Like the actual 6 o'clock news?" "No," Ethan said. He had not watched the news. "They're doing a whole segment," Danny said. "A whole thing. With the video, and they interviewed someone in your neighborhood, and there's this part where they talk about you working at Castillo's and..." He stopped, caught himself. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," Ethan said. "You don't sound fine." "I'm tired, Danny." "Yeah." A pause. "For what it's worth, everyone I talked to today thinks you did the right thing." "Mrs. Diaz told me the same thing," Ethan said. "Mrs. Diaz, this van lady?" "Yeah." "Well, if Mrs. Diaz said it," Danny said with a shift in his voice that might have been a smile, "then it must be right." "Yeah," Ethan said. And for the first time all day, something in his chest loosened just slightly, not from importance, not from the 22 million views, or the news segment, or the paper in his pocket, but from Danny Figueres, using the same logic a 67-year-old woman with a heat shield problem used to evaluate the rightness of a thing simply and without theater from the gut. "Get some sleep," Danny said. "I'm trying," Ethan said. He was home by 6:42. His mother was on the couch watching something on her laptop with headphones in. She looked up when he came in and pulled one headphone out and asked if he was hungry, and he said yes, and she said there was pasta. He ate the pasta standing at the counter because he was too tired to find the ritual of the table. He washed his bowl, he sat on the edge of his bed and took the folded paper out of his jacket pocket and looked at it again. We'll wait. He put it on the nightstand. He lay back and stared at the ceiling and thought about what Jack had said, "This is different," and about Mrs. Diaz saying, "That's exactly right," with the settled certainty of a woman who'd had 67 years to figure out what right looked like. And somewhere in a city he had never visited in a phone call being made, at that exact moment between two men whose names he did not yet know, a decision was being finalized that would change the architecture of the next 2 weeks of his life so completely that he would later divide his memory into the time before it and the time after. He was asleep before 10:30. He didn't know about the phone call yet. He would find out soon enough. The morning of the third day arrived the way significant mornings often do, without announcement, without ceremony, wearing the ordinary clothes of just another Tuesday in a small Arizona town. Ethan's alarm went off at 6:52. He silenced it. He made coffee. He stood at the kitchen window and drank half of it before he noticed that the street outside was quieter than it had been in 2 days, and that the particular kind of quiet felt different, not empty, but held, like the moment before a door opens. He didn't know yet what was already in motion. He didn't know that at 6:15 that morning, 17 miles outside of Kingman on a stretch of highway that cuts straight through high desert, the first group of motorcycles had assembled in a parking lot outside a closed diner and were waiting. Not making noise, not revving engines for effect, just waiting the way people wait when they know exactly where they're going and have already decided everything that needed deciding. He didn't know that by 6:45 that group had become 40, by 7:10 nearly 100. By 7:30 the number had more than doubled, and the line of motorcycles stretched far enough along the highway shoulder that a trucker passing in the early gray light would later tell his dispatch that he thought there'd been some kind of rally or event, and that the strangest part wasn't the number of bikes, it was the silence. 314 motorcycles. Not one of them was running yet. Ethan was putting on his work boots when his phone rang. It was Jack. "Don't go to work today," Jack said. Ethan stopped mid-lace. "Why?" "Because I need you to be home," Jack said. "Can you do that?" "Jack." "An hour," Jack said. "Just wait 1 hour. Can you do that for me?" Something in Jack's voice was different from the two previous calls. Not urgent exactly. Deliberately measured the way a man speaks when what he's controlling isn't information, but the pace at which it arrives. "Yeah," Ethan said slowly. "Okay." "Good," Jack said. "Don't watch the news. Don't look at your phone. Just sit with your coffee and wait." He hung up. Ethan sat with his coffee and did not wait well. He lasted approximately 4 minutes before his mother appeared in the hallway with her phone already in her hand and an expression on her face that he had never seen before, not worry, not pride, something bigger than both of those, something that didn't have an easy name. "Ethan," she said. Her voice was very careful. "Look outside." He looked at her face first. Then he went to the window. The street wasn't empty the way it had been when he looked 5 minutes ago. The street was filling, not with press vans, not with curious strangers holding phones at arm's length. What was filling his street, rolling slow and absolute from the north end in complete silence, was motorcycles. One after another, moving at the speed of a procession, occupying the road, not aggressively, but with the overwhelming, simple fact of their number. Ethan stood at the window and counted. He got to 40 before he stopped counting. They kept coming. Diane Walker put her hand over her mouth. "Mom," Ethan said. She shook her head. She couldn't speak yet. The motorcycles filled the street in front of their house and kept going past the house around the block, spreading through the neighborhood with that same eerie, controlled silence that would later be described by everyone who witnessed it as the most powerful thing about the whole event. Not the number, the silence. 300 machines that could have shaken windows and rattled dishes, choosing collectively to make no sound at all. Ethan's phone buzzed, a text from Jack. "Come outside when you're ready. No rush. We're not going anywhere." Ethan read it. He set the phone on the table. He stood there for a moment in the middle of his kitchen with his jacket half on, and his left boot still untied, and his coffee going cold on the counter. And he understood, for the first time genuinely understood, not as an abstract social media number, but as a physical reality standing in his street, that something had changed permanently. Not in the world, in his life. In the specific geography of Tuesday morning in Kingman, Arizona, and in every Tuesday that would come after. His mother was crying, not loudly. Diane Walker didn't do things loudly, but the tears were there, moving quietly down her face while she kept her hand over her mouth and looked out the window at 300 motorcycles in her street. "Mom," Ethan said again. She turned to look at him. "I'm fine," she said, which was exactly what he always said when he wasn't sure he was, and they both recognized it at the same moment. "Go outside," she said. She wiped her face with the back of her wrist. "Go." He tied his boot. He put his jacket on properly. He opened the front door. The moment he stepped onto the front porch, a sound went through the crowd that was not loud but was continuous, not cheering, not applause, something lower and more resonant. The sound of several hundred people exhaling at the same time because they had been waiting for this, and the waiting was now over. He stood on the porch and looked at it all. The street was full in every direction he could see. Motorcycles and their riders standing beside them. Not in formation exactly, but with a kind of collective gravity arranged around a center that had not yet declared itself. Among them were people who were not riders, neighbors who had come out of their houses, people who had been on their way to work and stopped a woman Ethan recognized from the post office, two kids from down the block still in their school clothes. And then the crowd shifted, and Jack walked through it. He looked better than he had behind the gas station. Of course he did. He'd had time to sleep and heal and arrive on his own terms rather than from the ground. He was wearing the leather vest patches clear in the morning light, and he walked with the deliberate, unhurried stride of someone who had decided before he left the house exactly how fast he was going to move through this moment. He stopped at the bottom of Ethan's porch steps. They looked at each other. "You said 1 hour," Ethan said. "I lied," Jack said. The not quite smile was there again. "It was 40 minutes. Something moved through the people closest to them, a ripple of reaction that wasn't quite laughter, but was its first cousin. Ethan came down the steps. Jack extended his hand. Ethan took it. Jack gripped it the way men grip hands, when the handshake is not a formality, but a statement. And then he did something that Ethan had not expected. He put his other hand on Ethan's shoulder, and he held it there. And he looked at him with the direct, undeflected attention of a man who needed Ethan to understand that what he was about to say was not performance. "I brought some people," Jack said. "I noticed," Ethan said. "They wanted to come," Jack said. "I didn't have to convince anyone. I told people what happened and where you lived, and this is what showed up." Ethan looked out at the street again. He looked at the faces turned toward him. Not all of them the faces he might have expected from the patches and the leather and the motorcycles. Old men and young ones, women, a man in his 70s with a hearing aid and a Veterans of Foreign Wars pin on his jacket, who was not a biker at all, but had driven 40 minutes from Bullhead City because someone in his church had called him that morning and told him what was happening, and he had gotten in his car. Why, Ethan asked. He wasn't asking Jack specifically. He was asking the morning. He was asking the street. It was 6 seconds. I did what was in front of me to do. Why does this... He stopped. Jack answered quietly enough that it was between the two of them. "Because most people don't," he said. "That's why." A news crew had been allowed through, one crew camera operator, and a reporter Ethan didn't recognize, kept at a distance that had clearly been established before Ethan came outside. The reporter was speaking into her microphone, but the sound didn't reach them. Jack turned slightly, so he was facing both Ethan and the broader crowd, and his voice shifted into the register of someone who had decided to speak for more than one person's ears. "I want to say something," Jack said. Not loud, but it carried. People went quiet around them the way sound travels outward through water. "I've been riding for 40 years. I've been in a lot of situations. I've seen people make decisions, fast decisions, the kind you don't get time to think about, and I've learned something about those moments." He paused. The decision people make in 6 seconds is who they already are. All the time before that, that's just the making of it. No one spoke. "This kid," Jack said, and then corrected himself. "This man, right here. He's been being made for 18 years and nobody was watching. He paid for his neighbor's groceries because she couldn't cover it, and he didn't tell anyone. He works for the same man who gave him a chance at 15 because he doesn't walk away from people who showed up for him. He filed an insurance appeal by himself for his mother's medication because he couldn't afford a lawyer, and he just figured it out." Jack's voice stayed level. It was more devastating for that. He didn't step in because he was brave. He stepped in because doing nothing was not something his character would allow. Ethan stood beside Jack and looked at his own street and felt completely exposed in a way that had nothing to do with cameras. The things Jack had just said publicly, the groceries, the insurance appeal, his mother, these were not things Ethan had ever spoken about. They were not things he considered notable. They were just what you did when something needed doing and you were the person closest to it. And now 300 people were standing in his street because of them. His mother had come outside. He heard the door behind him and turned. Diane Walker stood on the porch in her work clothes, the ones she'd been about to leave for the call center in, and she was looking at Jack and then at the crowd and then at her son, and the expression on her face had gone past what it had been inside, past the hand-over-mouth tears, into something quieter and more interior that Ethan recognized as the look she got when something was happening that she was going to need time to understand. Jack looked up at her. He took a step toward the porch and looked at her directly. "Mrs. Walker," he said. "Diane," she said automatically. "Diane," Jack said, "your son helped me when he had every reason to keep walking. I want you to know that I don't take that lightly, and I want you to know that whatever I can do to make sure this family is taken care of, I will do. Not as payment. There isn't a payment for what he did, just because it's the right thing." Diane Walker looked at him for a long moment. "Are you going to give me a speech?" she said. Jack blinked. A startled sound moved through the people near enough to hear. "Because I've had a week," she said, and her voice had that particular dry precision that mothers develop after years of dealing with situations that have no good manual. "I've had reporters calling my work. I've had strangers in my street for 3 days. I've watched 12 million people share a video of my son doing something that could have gotten him seriously hurt." She paused. "So if you're going to give me a speech, it better be good." Jack looked at her for a full 3 seconds. Then he said, "No speech, Diane, just the truth. Your son has better instincts than most men I've known in 40 years of knowing men. And that came from somewhere." She looked at him. Something shifted in her face. Not softened exactly, it was more like a lock turning. "He got it from his father," she said quietly. "I believe that," Jack said. And then, because neither of them had anything to add to that, the moment completed itself and became part of the permanent record. The reporter was closer now, not close enough to intrude, but close enough that when Jack turned toward the camera with the deliberate movement of someone who had decided it was time, she was there. He raised one hand and she moved forward with the microphone, and the camera operator adjusted, and the dozen or so people in the immediate circle stepped back slightly to make space without being asked. "I want to say something on the record," Jack said. He waited for the red light on the camera. "I want to say it clearly so there's no interpretation needed." He looked directly into the lens. "The man standing next to me is named Ethan Walker. He is 18 years old. He works as a mechanic. He lives in this house. Last Thursday night, he walked past a situation that everyone else walked past, and he made a different choice." He paused. "I've heard a lot of people this week use the word hero. I want to talk about that word for a minute, because I think people use it to make themselves feel like heroism is rare and special and separate from ordinary life, like it only visits certain people under certain conditions." His jaw tightened slightly. "What I saw wasn't rare. What I saw was someone who had spent 18 years building a character, and then one night his character had to show up fast. And it did." He looked over at Ethan. "That's all. That's the whole thing." Ethan held Jack's gaze for a moment and then looked away, which was the only thing he trusted himself to do with that. The reporter spoke. "Mr. She hesitated over the name, clearly uncertain about the last name, which was by design. "Jack, can you tell us what happens now? What are you hoping this moment accomplishes?" Jack considered the question without rushing it. "I'm not hoping it accomplishes anything," he said. "The accomplishing already happened. Thursday night. Everything after that is just the world catching up." "And for Ethan," she pressed, "is there something, a formal acknowledgement, some kind of—" "Ask him," Jack said. The camera turned. The microphone came toward Ethan, and he looked at it with the expression he'd been wearing all week. Not hostile, not performed, just present and deliberate. "I don't need acknowledgement," Ethan said, "but there must be something." "There's something I'd like," Ethan said. The reporter went still because his tone had changed, not louder, more specific. "My mother has a cardiac condition. She's on a medication that her insurance has denied 3 times. I filed an appeal and I'm waiting on it. If this He gestured vaguely at the street, at the cameras, at the entire improbable machinery of the last week. If any of this has any weight at all in the real world, then I'd like someone to help me figure that out. That's what I'd like. Silence. Not the dramatic silence of a movie, the actual silence of a group of people recalibrating to something they hadn't expected. Because everyone had been prepared for something quotable, something about courage or fear or the state of America. And instead, they had gotten my mother needs her medication covered. Jack turned and looked at Ethan. And what crossed his face in that moment, what moved through the eyes of a man who had spent 40 years learning to read people quickly and accurately, was something close to recognition. The clean, irreducible recognition of one specific quality he'd spent decades trying to describe to people who hadn't seen it, the absolute absence of performance. That, Jack said to no one in particular and everyone at once, is who this man is. He said it quietly, but the people near enough to hear it would remember it later. They would try to explain it to people who hadn't been there, and they would struggle because the power of the moment wasn't in the words but in the weight behind them, the weight of a man who didn't compliment, easily saying a thing he completely meant. Danny Figueres was in the crowd. Ethan spotted him near the back, standing on his toes to see over two riders in front of him wearing his gas station vest over a hoodie because he'd come straight from his shift. When Ethan's eyes found him, Danny raised both hands, not in a wave, but in the gesture of a man who has no words, and is using his hands to communicate the absence of them. Ethan almost smiled. Almost. Rafael Castillo was also in the crowd. Ethan saw him second, standing near the edge, arms folded, wearing his reading glasses on top of his head, the way he always did during the workday, even though there was nothing to read. He was looking at Ethan with the same expression he'd used in the back office when Ethan said not yet, the expression of a man holding something, carefully giving it the space it needed to become what it was going to be. When Raphael saw Ethan and see him, he did something he almost never did. He nodded, slowly, once. The full weight of the gesture was not in its size, but in its deliberateness. This was not the automatic nod of social reflex. This was Rafael Castillo, who didn't do things without meaning them, telling Ethan something in the only language he fully trusted. Ethan nodded back. The moment between them lasted 4 seconds and contained more than most conversations. The insurance claim question didn't stay a question for long. Before the camera crew had packed their equipment, and before the crowd had begun the slow dispersal that would take most of the morning, a woman named Carol Vance, who ran a nonprofit patient advocacy organization out of Phoenix, and who had watched the live stream from her office on her lunch break, was already on the phone with the insurance company's executive appeals division. She had the kind of voice that insurance companies eventually find it easier to cooperate with than to resist. And she had been doing this for 11 years, and she had never had a case where the entire city of Kingman was watching. Ethan didn't know this was happening yet. He would find out in 2 days. But right now, standing in his street with the morning getting warmer around him, and 300 motorcycles gradually coming back to life, with the patient, unhurried sound of engines that had been quiet long enough, he was standing next to his mother. She had come down from the porch. She was standing beside him with her shoulder touching his arm, and she was watching Jack make his way back through the crowd, shaking hands, stopping to speak to people in the particular way of a man who knew everyone here was owed something. "You should eat something," Diane said. "Mom, you didn't have breakfast," she said. "I can tell." He turned and looked at her. She was still watching the street, tracking Jack's progress through the crowd, and her profile was very calm and very tired and very fierce all at once, in the way that only hers could be. "I love you," he said. He didn't say it often, not because it wasn't true, but because in the Walker household, certain things were so foundational they didn't need regular restating. She turned and looked at him. Her expression shifted through 3 things in 2 seconds, something that flickered and steadied and settled. "I know," she said. "Eat breakfast." He laughed, actually laughed, the kind that comes out before you decide to let it brief and real and startled out of a chest that had been carrying a lot of weight for a long time. She patted his arm once firmly and went back inside. Jack found him again before he left. The crowd had thinned significantly, and the street was returning to something closer to its ordinary self, though it would never be entirely ordinary again, in the way that rooms are never entirely ordinary after something significant has happened in them. "I meant what I said," Jack told him. "About the other night, about what I want to offer you." He paused. You ready to have that conversation? Ethan looked at him. I have conditions, he said. Jack raised an eyebrow. You have conditions. Rafael Castillo gets respect, Ethan said. Whatever happens, whatever the offer is, the man who gave me a chance doesn't get forgotten. He doesn't get pushed out. He gets brought up. Jack looked at him for a long moment. That's your condition. That's my condition, Ethan said. Jack was quiet. Then he said, Kid, you're negotiating for someone else before you've heard the terms for yourself. Yes, Ethan said. Another pause. Longer. All right, Jack said. He said it the way a man says something when it has cleared a test he'd been running without announcing it. Castallo comes up. That's a given. Anything else? I want to hear the whole thing, Ethan said. Before I say yes or no, the whole thing honestly without the version you think I want to hear. Jack extended his hand again. That's the only version I have, he said. Ethan shook it. The last motorcycle left Ethan's street at 10:47 a.m. By noon, a video of Jack's statement had been viewed 4 million times. By the following morning, the insurance company had initiated an expedited review of Diane Walker's claim unprompted, citing a procedural error in the original assessment. Carol Vance in Phoenix said nothing about what she'd done. She went back to her other cases. Jack drove north on Route 9 and did not look back. But he carried with him the image of Ethan Walker standing on that porch with his boot half-tied and his coffee going cold, and the whole improbable weight of the week on his shoulders and the specific quality of stillness that the young man had, which Jack had been trying to find a word for since Thursday night. He found it somewhere around mile marker 14. The word was integrity, not the bumper sticker version. The original meaning, integer, whole, undivided, the same thing in public as in private. The same person with cameras rolling as without them. The same man at noon in front of 300 people as at 10 p.m. alone in his kitchen eating pasta standing at the counter because he was too tired to find the table. Whole, that was Ethan Walker. And Jack was not done with him yet. 2 weeks passed. In the way of things that change lives, the changing happened, mostly in the spaces between the visible moments, not in the crowd or the cameras or the statements made on record, but in the accumulated small decisions of days that looked ordinary from the outside and were anything but. The insurance claim was approved on a Wednesday. Ethan found out by voicemail a formal, slightly awkward message from someone in the company's appeals department who used the word expedited 3 times and procedural error twice and never once acknowledged the obvious, which was fine with Ethan. He listened to it standing at his workbench in Castillo's with an oil filter in his hand, and when it was over, he stood there for a moment and then set the oil filter down very carefully on the workbench like something that might break. Then he called his mother. She answered on the second ring. Ethan. The claim went through, he said. Silence. The specific pressurized silence of a woman who has been holding something in reserve for a long time because she couldn't afford to let it out. Mom, he said. I heard you, she said. Her voice was controlled in the way that things are controlled when the alternative is coming apart. I heard you, okay? They're calling it a procedural error, he said. Of course they are, she said. And then despite everything, despite the relief and the exhaustion and the weeks of waiting, that she laughed. A short, dry, completely genuine laugh that had 4 months of insurance denials inside it. Of course they are. I know, he said. Thank you, she said. You don't have to, Ethan. Her voice had gone quiet and direct, the voice she used when she needed him to stop deflecting and receive something. Thank you. He held the phone and breathed. Yeah, he said. Okay, you're welcome. He went back to work. Raphael was at the front desk when Ethan came through at the end of the day. He had reading glasses on and was going through invoices, which was the administrative task he disliked most and therefore always scheduled last in the day, so it couldn't ruin anything useful. Claim went through, Ethan said as he passed. Raphael didn't look up immediately. He finished the line he was reading. Then he set the invoice down and removed his glasses and looked at Ethan with an expression that had no complexity in it at all, just the clean, direct satisfaction of someone for whom the right outcome is its own complete statement. Good, he said. Yeah, Ethan said. Go home, Raphael said. He put his glasses back on and picked up the invoice. Ethan went home. Jack called on Thursday evening. Not the careful, measured call of a man managing a situation, something different, more direct. less architecture. I want to sit down with you this weekend, Jack said, properly. Just us somewhere quiet. I have something to lay out, and I want you to hear it completely before you say anything. Okay, Ethan said. Saturday morning. There's a diner on Route 93, 15 miles north. Best coffee between here and Vegas, which isn't saying much, but it's saying something. I'll be there, Ethan said. Bring your questions, Jack said. All of them. Don't save the uncomfortable ones for later. I don't usually save things, Ethan said. I know, Jack said. That's why I want to talk to you. Saturday came with the particular clarity of desert mornings in late October, when the air has finally committed to being cool and the light comes in sideways, and everything looks slightly more defined than it does the rest of the year. Ethan drove not his car because he didn't have one that would reliably make 30 miles round trip without negotiation. So Raphael had lent him the shop truck without being asked, leaving the keys on the workbench Friday afternoon with a note that said back by noon, which was Raphael's way of saying, take whatever time you need, but don't be reckless about it. Jack was already at the diner when Ethan arrived. He had a corner booth and 2 coffees and the look of a man who had organized his thoughts before he got there and was now waiting patiently for the conversation to begin. Ethan sat down. He looked at the coffee. He looked at Jack. He picked up the cup. Jack was right about the coffee. Tell me what you know about the offer, Jack said. What you think it is. I think it's more than money, Ethan said. It is, Jack said. I think it has something to do with building things, Ethan said. The paper said master builder. I looked that up and I got 20 different definitions, so I'm going to need yours. Jack nodded slowly. Here's mine, he said. There are people in the networks I work with, legitimate networks. I want to be clear about that. Who needs skilled trades? Real skilled trades. People who can work with their hands and also think. Who can manage other people without losing themselves in the authority of it. Who can be trusted with resources because their instinct is not to take but to build. He paused. That's rare. I've been looking for it for a long time. I wasn't looking in Kingman, Arizona behind an abandoned gas station, but that's where I found it. Ethan drank his coffee. And what does that look like practically, he said, day to day? Training, Jack said. First, real training, not the kind where someone talks at you, the kind where you work alongside people who are better than you until you become better than them. Construction fabrication, project management, paid training. Your mother's medical covered during that time, not as a gift as part of your compensation package because that's what it is. He looked at Ethan steadily. Then placement. Real work, real pay, real responsibility, and an understanding that the people around you get opportunities too. You said Castillo. Castillo gets a contract maintenance fleet work, whatever the network needs in this region. He doesn't lose his shop. He gains a reliable client. Ethan was quiet. You're doing the thing, Jack said. What thing? The thing where you're looking for what's wrong with it, Jack said. I'm not offended. Keep going. Why me? Ethan said. The question he'd been carrying since the first morning the vans appeared outside the garage. Not why the offer, why the investment. You could find a skilled tradesman with more experience and less complication anywhere. I'm 18. I'm a mechanic at a one-base shop. I've got no credentials past what Raphael taught me. So why buy? Because of the groceries, Jack said. Ethan stopped. The woman 2 doors down, Jack said. Mrs. Ferreira, 73, fixed income. You've been covering the difference in her grocery bill for 8 months. You asked the store to run it through as a store credit so she wouldn't know it was you. He held Ethan's gaze. Because you knew she wouldn't accept it if she knew. The silence between them was complete. How do you know that? Ethan said quietly. I looked, Jack said simply. When something surprises me, I look closer. What I found when I looked closer at you was not what people find when they look closer at most people. He leaned forward slightly. I've known men who did brave things once. Big things. Things that got noticed. And when you look closer at those men, you found not much. The brave thing was the exception. The rest was ordinary at best and sometimes worse. He shook his head. When I looked closer at you, I found the groceries. I found the fact that you took a pay cut to stay at Castillo's when a dealership offered you more because Raphael had taken a chance on you, and you didn't think it was right to leave the moment something better came along. I found the insurance appeals plural because you'd done this once before for a neighbor, a different neighbor before it was your own mother. He stopped. So when you ask me why that's why. Not the tire iron. The tire iron was just the moment I happened to be looking. Ethan put his coffee down. He looked out the diner window for a moment at the highway and the desert beyond it, at the distance that was just distance, not symbolic, not cinematic, just the actual ground stretching out under an actual sky in a real state, in the real world where real things happen to real people. I'm not a hero, he said. It came out differently than it had before, not deflection, not modesty, more like accuracy, like a measurement being read off a tool. I know, Jack said. Those things. Ethan stopped. Started again. Mrs. Ferreira needed groceries. It seemed like the thing to do. Raphael gave me 3 years of work in teaching. Leaving for $50 more a week seemed like bad math. He paused. It wasn't moral philosophy. It was just what made sense. Yes, Jack said. That's exactly it. Ethan looked at him. That's exactly it, Jack said again. That's the thing I spent 40 years trying to explain to people and couldn't find the words for. The people who do the right thing as moral philosophy, they burn out. They get tired. They need to be seen doing it or it stops feeling worth it. But the people who do it because it's what makes sense, he stopped, sat back. Those people don't run out. A waitress came and refilled their cups without asking. Ethan thanked her. She looked at him for a moment, recognition crossing her face, the particular hesitation of someone who thinks they know someone from somewhere, and then let it go and moved on. He appreciated that. I have one more condition, Ethan said. Of course you do, Jack said. Other people, Ethan said. Not just Castillo. If this network is what you say it is, if there's real work and real training and real opportunity, I want a pathway in it for people like me. People who didn't get credentials because they couldn't afford the time away from working. People who are good at things that don't fit on a resume. I'm not asking for charity programs. I'm asking for the same logic you used on me, look closer. Because most people who are doing what I do quietly without needing to be seen, nobody's looking. Jack has studied him. You want to change the intake, Jack said. I want to expand it, Ethan said. There's a difference, Obrim. Another silence, the good kind, the kind where something is being turned over and examined honestly rather than waited out. That's going to take time, Jack said. I know, Ethan said. I'm 18. I have time. The corner of Jack's mouth moved. Not quite the not quite smile he usually held in reserve, something more complete than that. You know what Raphael said to me when I called him, he said. Ethan looked up. You called Raphael, Mom. Last week, Jack said. I wanted a character reference. The honest kind. He paused. He said, and I'm going to quote this exactly because I wrote it down. He said, Ethan Walker shows up. That's the whole thing. He shows up and then he doesn't leave. Ethan was quiet. He also said, Jack continued, that you make the best coffee of anyone who's ever used the machine in the back of his shop, and that the transmission work you did on a '09 Tacoma last spring was the cleanest job he'd ever seen on that model. He seemed to consider these things equally important. Ethan laughed. The real kind. The kind Raphael had never heard and wouldn't have wanted to because it was private and it was for this moment and it was exactly appropriate. He reached across the table and shook Jack's hand for the third time in 2 weeks. Okay, he said. Okay, Jack stepped in. They drank their coffee. The diner around them moved in its ordinary Saturday rhythm plates and conversation and the bell above the door and the particular light of a late October morning coming through the windows at its sideways angle, making everything look slightly more defined than usual. Ethan Walker was 18 years old and had grease under his fingernails that the soap hadn't fully reached, and he had just agreed to something that would change the next decade of his life in ways he couldn't yet map. He felt at the scale of the thing, the weight and the possibility of it, but what he felt more precisely sitting in that corner booth with cooling coffee and the highway outside and the morning doing what mornings do was not excitement, not fear, not the performed calm of someone suppressing a bigger reaction. He felt like himself, exactly completely without remainder himself. The same person who had walked home from a 10-hour shift on a Thursday night and turned a corner and made a decision in 6 seconds that he had not overthought or delayed or dressed in language. The same person who put the tire iron back against the wall before he walked away because it wasn't his. The same person who had been paying for Mrs. Ferreira's groceries for 8 months because she needed them and he could manage it and the math was simple. The same person in a different chapter. Still himself. That was the thing about Ethan Walker that no camera had ever quite captured, and no viral video could fully transmit, and no number of views could contain. The thing that Jack had found when he looked closer and Raphael had known for 3 years, and Mrs. Diaz had recognized in the way she recognized things plainly and without ceremony, with the quiet certainty of someone who had been paying attention to the world long enough to know what mattered in it. He wasn't made in 6 seconds. He was made in 18 years of small choices that nobody watched. The days he showed up when he could have called out. The neighbors he helped without posting about it. The deals he didn't take because the loyalty was worth more than the money. The nights he worked the insurance paperwork alone at the kitchen table because the alternative was letting his mother carry it. The mornings he made the coffee strong and didn't add sugar because a man who controls what he accepts becomes over time the kind of man who can be trusted with what matters. Real heroism is not a moment. It never was. It is the accumulated weight of 1,000 invisible choices, each one making the next one possible, building toward a person who, when the moment finally arrives, simply does what they were always going to do. Ethan Walker walked home from work on a Thursday night. He heard something wrong in an alley. He turned toward it instead of away. 6 seconds, 18 years in the making, and he was just getting started.